Welcome to ILTV's Insider. I'm Steve Leibowitz. There has been so much political speculation of late about the possibility for the formation of a national unity government in Israel. And what could that accomplish? Well, it could diffuse the deep divides in society by freezing judicial legislation. There could be a potential deal for an historic normalization agreement with Saudi Arabia. Maybe it would be more easily achievable with a centrist government. Potentially, there could be a lowering of the flames after more than 30 weeks of mass protests to allow the nation to heal. Dealing somehow with the landmark High Court decision next month that could send Israel into a constitutional crisis. And joining me are friends from both sides of the political fray. Jerusalem Deputy Mayor Flor Hassan Nahum, who's in charge of foreign affairs in the Israeli capital, and Alon Tal, former Knesset member with the National Unity Party, headed by Benny Gantz, I hope to say, and I'd also like to say, I hope back in the Knesset in the near future. And just based on the conversation we had before the broadcast, I know that this is going to be lively because away from the cameras, I've discussed with both of these people that there is more policy that they agree about than they disagree about. I would say that they represent, in effect, the great majority of Israelis that are in the center. So let me ask you this, Fleur. Wouldn't it be easier for Netanyahu and better for the country if Alon Tal and his friends from National Union and Yair Lapid from Yesh Atid came into a coalition with Netanyahu, replacing Smotrich and Ben Gvir? Would the country be better off?
So, Steve, I agree with you. I think that there's much more that unites us than what divides us, always has been. The statistics are that 80% of Israelis agree on 80% of everything. And so that's pretty good. And so the question is, what would that government look like? And I think that Netanyahu has proved through the years that when he can have a centrist government, when he can be actually more of the right element of the country, rather than the person holding everything together on the left part, he's happier. That is much more in his comfort zone than where he is right now. And Netanyahu would have wanted a government with all elements, but it was the two centrist parties and the parties in the opposition who refused to sit with Netanyahu under the excuse that they won't sit with him because of the court cases, which now we see are kind of dissipating into the dust.
Well, that's still in the courts. We don't know where
it's
that's
still in
going.
the courts. The bribery charges have basically been told. The judges have basically told the prosecution
Coalition
lawyers.
members can't make judgments on that. They either have to decide that if the man is standing trial, like Netanyahu said when Olmert was prime minister, he said, you've got to go.
Well, the law actually says something different. The law,
I understand.
The law says something different. And so, and especially cases which he believes are actually trumped up charges, which I believe when you look at the veracity of the claims against Netanyahu, it really looks like something that was certainly fabricated.
Right, well, charges or no charges. Last time around, with charges alone, Benny Gantz joined into the coalition. It was a time of Corona, and we all know that he was double-crossed and he didn't get to become prime minister, and we went back to another round of elections. Why don't you now jump in, just like during the time of Corona, and save the country?
There's a famous expression, Steve, that says, fooled me once, shame on you. Fooled me twice, shame on me. Benny Gantz committed essentially political suicide for the good of the country, fell on the proverbial hand grenade when he, after 3 elections, decided, with a third of the people unemployed and a raging epidemic, he needed to put some end to the political chaos, and he did so. And for what was he rewarded? He was rewarded by a litany of lies, obfuscation, insulting, deals behind his back, the typical Netanyahu modus operandi.
Old news. Think about the future. Where are we going?
I want to share with you, I think Flora, who has an excellent public representative, and I'm sure she and I could sit in any government together and agree on 95%, not 80%. But let me tell you what Chili Trooper said, who is, I think, and anybody's even a force for, he's a famous lawmaker who's really his outstanding characteristic is his ability to cross divides, whatever. And he said, you have to understand with Netanyahu, it is like having a spouse who has betrayed you. Time after time, Netanyahu would say one thing with us and do the opposite thing. And now we've seen that in the end, what we felt all along was that Netanyahu does not have the good of the country in his considerations. He only has his own political survival. And when he goes and crowns Ben Gvir a convicted Jewish terrorist, when he goes and ensures that the far-right elements in the religious Zionist party are controlling it, it creates an impossible situation. And I will say what Benny Gantz says in every opportunity. When Benjamin Netanyahu does something good for the country, and he's done many good things in the past, we will support him. Bring an agreement with Saudi Arabia. We will not bring down the government. We're behind you. But when you look at what the Likud has become in the last 3 or 4 years, and the extremist elements, and the kind of incendiary rhetoric which characterizes it, that's really not a party right now that we want to sit in. And anybody who is and was moderate is either left the Likud or leaving.
Fleur, I know that the idea of expanding the Abraham Accords is very important to you, and we may be coming up very soon with the possibility of normalization with the Saudi Arabians. I don't see Netanyahu getting his government to pass an agreement that will require the kind of sacrifices, concessions that may have to be made to the Palestinians, perhaps about nuclear energy for the Saudis, a nuclear power plant, and so on. But with Gantz and with Lapid, they would have a solid centrist majority of, I would say, 70 to 80 seats if it was without Smotrich, without the left-wing extremists, and without the Arab parties, and without the ultra-Orthodox, just the centrist people that really care about the security interests of this country. Wouldn't that be great?
Well, first of all, expanding the Abraham Accords absolutely is great. And I think that once Saudi...
We all want that. We all want that.
Everybody wants that. And I think once Saudi does normalize with Israel, it's the end of the Arab-Israeli conflict as we know it. It's a new era of peace for the region. And I think we could also deal with the Iran threat much more significantly. And I really believe that Benjamin Netanyahu came back to lead the country for two main reasons. One is to deal with the Iranian threat, which is still an existential threat that we have not very far away from us. And the second is to make a deal with Saudi Arabia. That is the reason, I believe, that he wanted to.
But there will be sacrifices asked of us.
There will always be sacrifices. Nothing comes for nothing. And I don't think we're as close to the deal as people actually are reporting that we are. And I don't think it's Israel's, the reason that things are not advancing or not close, and they are not our reasons. They've got a lot to talk about with the Americans. There's a lot of defense conversations about what they're going to be getting, if they should be getting any type of foreign aid, military hardware, etc.
Sure.
There's a lot. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves in terms of Saudi. I think we all want peace with Saudi. We're getting ahead of ourselves, and I think that the less we talk about it, the better. And what really bothers me...
Or would you just agree with me that if indeed that was his top priorities, I thought it was to lower the high cost of living, if you'd listen to him. But then why has he spent almost his entire first year in office dismembering the constitutional consensus which has allowed this country to survive for 75 years in a reasonable form of democracy? The horrible polarization and the anger and the nastiness is as a result of unilateral efforts to go against.
You could say it's the unilateral efforts, or you could say it's about the reaction to the unilateral efforts to reforms that people in your party were claiming we needed for years. So let's not be hypocritical about this.
I'm not being hypocritical.
The reforms are not the problem.
I'm just saying is that for Bibi Netanyahu to say, I came in to make peace with Saudi Arabia and to deal with the Iranian crisis and to devote all his parliamentary energy on another issue which is so divisive, that's disingenuous.
I don't think he realized it was going to be so divisive, and it's not his issue.
And I think it's the real reason why Benjamin Netanyahu refuses to relinquish power. And I wish he'd left after 3 excellent terms and gone president, but he could not let it go. And now, because there are 3 indictments, and I disagree with this dismissive approach, when your wife gets a $40,000 necklace, bracelet, as a gift, and then you give somebody a political favor, it may look like it.
But guys, we're not going to reach agreement about any of that, and certainly not about the trial or about any of the corruption allegations or the corruption minister that people call him. I'm talking about moving forward now.
I'm all for moving forward, but how can you, when somebody promises the President of the United States, I will not make unilateral constitutional changes, and then sits